conservative, constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And welcome everybody to another amazing day right here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Amazing week, of course, as we're starting off our week here. I thank you for joining me. On today's show, we'll be covering an interesting debate of sorts. A conversation went down in the Government Contract Review Committee by the legislature regarding some housing units going on in eastern Kentucky at an extraordinarily high cost per unit. Also, we'll be digging into Beshear lashing out at TJ Roberts, Representative Roberts, because, well, you know, that's Beshear. He's petty. He's a petty person, to be quite honest. So we'll be looking at that. We'll also be looking at, despite Trump coming in, we still see some movements that the state as a whole under Beshear is making towards continuing to push this DEI-type thought process, DEI-type ideas with a contract we'll look at here in the Housing Authority in Kentucky. And then finally, given some time to, we'll also discuss the first bill to pass and be signed to become law to this session, the tax cut, income tax cut. We'll have all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Before I dig down into it, please make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe if you're listening on a place where that can happen. If you're listening on the radio or TV, head over to theandrewshow.com, hit the Listen Now tab, and see all the different places you can tune into the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Also, you can reach out to the show by emailing info@theandrewshow.com, info@theandrewshow.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @KYCooperrider and just search Andrew Cooperrider on Facebook. So without further ado, let's dig into it. So with Musk coming in at the national level, talking about DOGE, it's really turned a culture shift where talking about wasteful government spending, at least on the national level, is starting to become a big part of the conversation. Now, anybody who's listened to my show for any length of time knows that wasteful spending, government out of control spending, has been one of my number one things that I talk about so very often. And it's mainly due to, well, not only is it a waste of the money that's being taken from us, but also how government spends its money is how it ends up controlling our lives, how it pushes its agenda on us and drawing attention to exactly what government is trying to do, what demises of you or mine that it's trying to fund, and ideologies is definitely worth talking about, looking at. So it's great that now nationally that has really caught on. It's been a passion of mine. That's why I ran for state treasurer there, because I want to draw attention to wasteful spending going on within our state. And the great thing is we can do a lot more about it because those individuals, the legislators and the governor, are both right in our backyard. Now, sometimes though, we'll hear that, well, we've got a Democrat governor, what can we do? Now, I hope that our legislators one day will be able to look at the kind of wasteful spending going on within our state and actually do something about it by passing either budget restrictions, not spending more money year over year, hitting the departments with the stick per se of hurting them by taking away their money when they're going to spend it crazily, really cut some departments down like we're seeing at the national level. But there's also things that go on locally and all across this country. Before I dig into any kind of state level contracts, I want to talk about things going on at the county level. In many cities and counties, urban county governments across the state, they engage in something called PDR, property development rights, purchasing of it. And I've talked about it before on the show, but I think it's worth visiting as we're turning towards how government uses our tax funds to make life worse for us. And this is one of the number one ways they do it. You see, what happens here, it's a part of the agricultural conservative easement programs, these property development right programs. And if you drive around Lexington or Louisville areas, you'll see signs on farms that say PDR protected. And what that is, the cities and counties that have a PDR program spend millions a year to buy up property development rights. In fact, here in Fayette County, the city owns 40,000 acres worth of property development rights, and they continue to purchase more. And the entire point behind the program, they say, is to keep a rural feel. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't. Maybe you want the government involved in protecting our farmlands or not. What they do here is they go to private property owners and they offer them a large sum of money, millions of dollars, in order to, depending on, of course, the size and everything else, in order to sign over the property development rights to the cities or counties. In return, they hold on to the land. They get to use it as farmland from now into forever. They don't have to give up their land or ownership, but it means that the property cannot be developed into housing or industrial space. So it stops them from being able to sell to developers. Now, this is normally, for those who want to maintain that rural feel, they would say, I support this. This is the kind of thing I want to get behind, protecting our feel of our communities. But how this hurts the taxpayer beyond just the millions we're handing out for nothing but aesthetic feel is that it creates this interesting cycle, because if some cities, like Lexington for an example, would stop trying to grow, this wouldn't be a big problem. But simultaneously, while buying up property development rights, they also take our tax dollars to go ahead and incentivize businesses. They do this in Louisville too. Businesses and other employers to come to the area. That naturally brings people into the area. Those people need to find a place to live. And that creates a housing shortage in the area. That drives up prices. Now, you'd say they could go out and develop and make more developments and build more houses, but of course the city's gone around buying up these property development rights. They've also weaponized urban service boundaries in a lot of these places. They put in place zoning laws too as well, and it drives up the prices of a home. So not only is the taxpayer paying the millions of dollars to buy up these property development rights, but then they're paying out the millions of dollars to these employers and businesses to incentivize them to come to the area. Then they have to now pay more in their property taxes if they can even afford a home at all, due to the increase of property value due to a limited supply. And this cycle continues onwards and on and continues forever. And this cycle driving up the prices of homes means that eventually everybody's going to be pushed into apartments. In fact, it's a stated goal of cities like Louisville and Lexington and some in northern Kentucky and even out west to go ahead and build up and not out. They want more apartments because they don't want you to have, a house, a yard. That takes up a lot of space. That requires, of course, more land development, more sewer lines, more roads to take care of. It'd be better if everybody just lived in one place. They talk about these 15-minute cities where everything, work, play, and where you live would all be 15 minutes away from each other. And a part of the way to get people to that level, because then, of course, too, if everything's within a 15-minute walk, you're going to drive less. And if you own less cars, that means, they have to spend less on roads. They make the same amount in taxes, but they don't have to shell out so much taking care of the roads. They like that. That sounds nice for everybody. And so in turn, it pushes the middle class now to be unable to purchase a home, causing them to force the middle class into apartments. It'll soon be where only those who make the highest levels of income can afford to either live close to where they work, not have to drive 45 minutes every day, or have to live in apartments. For the middle class, those who make the most, they'll be the only ones who can own land in certain areas, even small little plots, the only ones who can own houses. So it's truly an awful cycle, weaponizing our taxpayer dollars in order to move homeownership out of the reach of literally thousands of Kentuckians. Now, it could stop, You could see a state legislature pass a law stopping that from happening. You could see defunding of PDR programs. You could see local people calling out the economic development that causes the push of course, the population in an area. But likelihood of that happening is pretty low. Well, coming up after this, we're going to discuss, speaking of housing, an interesting housing contract out in eastern Kentucky that caused quite a stir and a little bit long of a debate, something definitely worth looking at as we take a look into how the Beshear Administration, the people they have, one, how lazy they are and how willing they are to waste your taxpayer funds. So we'll have all that after this short break. You're listening to The Andrew Cooperrider Show. And you are back with The Andrew Cooperrider Show. So a few months ago, a contract came before the legislature's Government Contract Review Committee. And I've talked about this committee before. It's interesting how it works. It sort of kind of doesn't have teeth. It kind of does. There's tools the legislatures could use while in session to deal with things, but largely what the individual committee itself is empowered to do based upon the state Supreme Court's interpretation of our state constitution is kind of limited. But a few months ago, a contract came forward dealing with Eastern Kentucky and a housing contract there where they're trying to build homes, of course, for those displaced from the floods, in this case in Jackson, Kentucky. And the issue arose when one of the senators that was then on that committee noticed that the contract was to build 18 apartments in an existing building. So they're taking over a 62,000 square foot building. They're going to go ahead and build 18 apartments in that building, retrofit it. It was, I guess, a commercial space type building. And then go ahead and build these 18 apartments. But the cost to do this was over $6.2 million, or that's $345,000 a unit. Now, this is in Jackson, Kentucky, and I checked on Realtor.com, and they said that the median home is selling for $277,000. In fact, I did what normal people do when they're looking at building a house or investing in an area, building apartments, and I looked at some comps in the area. So let me show you what you can get for $350,000 right now in Jackson. Now, this is a home located at 293 Oakwood Drive in Jackson. It's currently listed for sale at $350,000. So chances are they'd probably take $345,000, $475,000 if you were to offer it with them. The cost per unit for just these 2-bedroom apartments, 1- and 2-bedroom apartments that they're building in downtown Jackson. And so at 293 Oakwood Drive in Jackson, Kentucky, it is a 4-bed, 3-bath house with 3,796 square feet. Looks like it's got a finished basement even. Nice. And it sits on just over an acre. Now, for those of you, of course, that aren't going to go research this listing, because why would you do that? Let me just tell you, this home has hardwoods throughout, updated bathrooms, newer appliances in the kitchen. I mean, this is this is a move-in ready home. Maybe it might need some new carpets in some areas because, that's pretty typical. You got to replace carpets. They get stained and dirty. But this is a move-in ready home. And you can either get this for $350,000 or get a 2-bedroom apartment. And literally they're 4 minutes apart. There's not like a big drive time difference here. And so, of course, the state did the reasonable thing and decided that they were going to go ahead and go with the apartments. Instead of building houses at a cost that could be lower than $350,000, they said, we're going to get these apartments. And this rose some questions out of those on the Government Contract Review Committee. They said, why does this cost so much? So keep in mind that they asked this question a few months ago. They deferred the contract. It was now being brought up again in January. So these people have been asked about this contract before. Why is the price per unit $344,000? Now, when they originally had asked the senators, they didn't have a very good answer for them. And so they deferred the contract, said, look, until you can give us these answers, we're going to defer this contract. So they've had months now to prepare answers to these questions. So I'm going to play the first part of when they're first asked again why the cost of this housing is so high. This is by Senator Meredith asked this question. Now I'm going to play this video for you. It's 4 minutes, 20 seconds long. For those of you watching on the video format, you're going to see some parts where the screen is just like black, but you can still hear audio. It just flashes for a second black and then switches back. That is not on my end. I can't do anything about it. That is due to something that goes on with the LRC there that operates the legislative offices, operates the recording and airing of these committee meetings. And for some reason, sometimes the screen goes black. So let's go ahead and take a listen to exactly what they had to say.
Was you look at the per unit price of these housing units, and it just seemed extraordinarily high. That when you compare it just to residential construction, small homes, it just seemed exceedingly high. So can you speak to that?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This is a great project. Travis here can speak about the details of the budget, but this is for residents of Eastern Kentucky impacted by the 2021-2022 floods. It's to benefit the national objective to benefit low to moderate income individuals. Multifamily housing, as everyone here knows, is a critical issue for all of Kentucky, especially in Eastern Kentucky, where we had so many housing units lost and so many people displaced. And this is a vacant building in the middle of downtown Jackson, 2 stories, I believe, and to impact 18 to build 18 units in partnership with a nonprofit developer is a really fantastic achievement for the city of Jackson, the mayor of Jackson, and all the folks there that's going to benefit from this project. So Travis, you want to answer the question about the budget itself?
Yes. So the project does include, that's factored into the cost of those units, is the acquisition, the price of acquiring the building that's already standing, as well as the upgrade to the infrastructure to help support the building being converted to residential multifamily, which does require some water sewer improvements outside the building as well to bring that up.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Go ahead.
I understand that, but again, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me personally that if the cost of acquisition of the current building and property is so high, couldn't we have found property otherwise that would not have needed renovation, new construction, that would have been considerably cheaper than this?
Well, I could speak to, the city of Jackson, Breathitt County, if you've been there, only has so many parcels that are developable to build this kind of facility, just by the nature of Eastern Kentucky and the city, the county, all the folks at the state have spent an inordinate amount of time looking for developable property there. We've made a lot of inroads with existing property. Disaster recovery dollars have gone to purchase other plots of land to develop single-family housing, develop multiple family housing, but this kind of development is a lot different. And to be able to put 18 units up there with 1 bedroom, with 2 bedroom, to use an existing facility to remodel a vacant structure that's already there, it does have a price tag to do any of those types of things. So, I suppose to answer your question, this is an opportunity that was presented to us and applied for by the mayor of Jackson, and it was a fantastic project to get involved with. So, Travis, you want to add anything to that?
No, sir. I think that's pretty much the challenges that we've had in trying to find developable land there, and then also the that we had a nonprofit developer with experience in East Kentucky that brought us this project and needed these upgrades. Was an opportunity that we felt was right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, where is this building located?
It's along Kentucky 15 in Jackson. If you're heading, if you're coming off I guess what would be the new cut through that comes through there, and you can take a left kind of that heads towards downtown, or you take a right, and it's just down there on the right-hand side. I believe there's a McDonald's down there kind of next to it.
But there was an earnest attempt to try to find other property to.
Oh, absolutely.
For this purpose, and you're saying.
Yeah.
Nothing was available.
Not that was brought to us. I mean, again, this was a developer that brought this project to us. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Now, you would think that given several months of preparedness, they would go ahead and have a pretty good answer to this question of why does it cost so much. But if you listen to what they said, first they start off by talking about, oh, this is a great project. Oh, this is wonderful project. It's going to provide housing. People are excited about this project. But that wasn't the question. We don't care what you personally think about the project. The question Senator Meredith asked, which they still really haven't answered, is why is it $344? I mean, let me say it to you another way. A private company would never build apartments in Jackson, Kentucky at $344,000 an apartment. Now, the only excuse they could give is, well, we couldn't find land to build on. They couldn't find a place where they could build 18 homes for people, so they have to renovate this building. Now, at first, it sounds like a good excuse until you really dig into exactly what they had to say. Because notice, they didn't go looking for it. They said that a nonprofit builder in the area brought this project to them. Now, you would think if you have an altruistic belief in going ahead and building housing, let's say, what's the spin for the second whether or not you think government should be in the business of building private homes or not? Let's just put that to the side. Let's pretend that that's okay. So if we all in this pretend world agreed that this is the proper role of government, well, we'd certainly say then we should maximize it as best we can. We should build the best houses we can that can facilitate, the average family in that area of good quality and get the most amount of homes built, most bang for our buck we can get. This is a nonprofit contractor too. I mean, normally contractors building homes and apartments, they need to make a profit. This one's not even making a profit, and yet that cost per unit is still $345,000 per unit for 18 apartments. It's really high, really high. They said, well, we couldn't find a place to build. But they actually didn't go looking for a place to build based on what they said. They said that somebody brought this to them. Now, you would think when you're spending $345,000 a unit, you might say, you know what, maybe we should seek to find an area we could build, a way we could build this project in the area for $100,000 less a unit, maybe at $245,000, let's say. Now, if you could save that on just one unit, would it not be worthwhile to send somebody to the area or to research the area and have you could literally take the savings on one home and pay somebody full time just to find place to build these 18 homes in Jackson, Kentucky. And trust me, they would find them. They would find the places. But instead, they said, well, this was just brought to us. So we went ahead and went with this because it's not our money. It doesn't matter. We'll just throw it, around, of course. Well, coming up after this, we'll dig into, they were asked again by a different senator, Senator Douglas. We'll go into what they had to say after this short break. And you're back on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So we've been listening to this contract review committee hearing where the Beshear Administration is being asked some hard questions about why are they spending $345,000 per apartment to build 18 apartments in Jackson, Kentucky. Now, it would be also something, I guess, a little bit different if, per se, they were building in, a new building. But keep in mind, they're not even doing that. They are renovating an existing building. So they're even saving money on having a foundation and frame out the houses and so on and so forth. And so Senator Douglas now comes in after they failed to answer what Senator Meredith had to ask. They did not give a good answer. So Senator Douglas goes ahead, comes in. He's going to ask again for them to cut through it. Let's see if he's able to cut through.
Senator Douglas, or Co-Chair Douglas.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair Hart. I express the same concern. First of all, I want to make sure that everyone understands. No one's questioning the need for such housing, and no one is questioning the need of the people for such housing. And no one is questioning the motivation to do these types of things. Because we ask questions doesn't mean that we're not empathetic to what's going on in that particular space. But it does seem that the cost is disproportionately high when we're renovating a building versus building new. Is that what we generally see in that region when someone renovates a building, that it costs so much more than it likely would cost to build new?
Thank you, Senator. I think to answer that question, what I could say is that these projects are thoroughly vetted by not just state staff, by Travis and his team.
Pardon me, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm not questioning whether it was vetted or any. I'm asking a yes or a no question, essentially.
What was the yes or no question?
The yes or no question was, is it standard or traditional for renovation of a building to have someone live in to cost so much more than building new?
I mean, we have engineering, we have design, we have construction, we have infrastructure construction, we have numerous federal and state guidelines that we have to abide by for cost effectiveness. So I think that you would find that the answer to that question would be yes, sir.
So then I would need to understand that instead of building new homes, perhaps we should start looking for places that I'm trying to get this because it's money that's being spent and it just seems counterintuitive. But again, I'm not questioning the sincerity. I'm just trying to understand it myself.
We are doing both, sir, and we'd be happy to talk with you about the specific budget details at some point if you like, and maybe bring
I
in
would
a
love,
nonprofit
for you to come by
developer.
my office and have that conversation
Sure,
with me.
absolutely.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Any other comments? If not, to have a to have a motion to consider the contract review without objection. All right. Do I have a motion to the contrary? All right, gentlemen, with no motion or second, the contract does move forward. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us.
Thank you.
Couldn't answer the question. Why specifically is it so expensive? What line item? I mean, what Douglas was looking for there is, can you point to a part of this budget for this building that is making it so expensive? They talked about, well, we got to improve sewer lines and blah, blah, blah. You have to do that when you develop a neighborhood anyways. And the houses are still cheaper as a house than these apartments are. And you don't have existing structures. They weren't able to point, they go to the same thing that, well, this is brought to us by a nonprofit developer with experience in the area, yada, 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 yada. Nothing of value to say. Now, at the end there, they took a vote on whether or not to approve the project. They didn't go ahead and approve it. Instead, they went ahead and they didn't disapprove it either. They just didn't put their stamp of approval on it, and it passed through, but wasn't approved, but not approved. This goes into the process, because see, what happens if they vote to say, never mind, we don't like this? Well, it ends up then back at the governor's desk, basically. It ends up to the cabinet, the finance cabinet director, not the state treasurer, which, leads to a question. If we have an elected position that's the state treasurer, and the state auditor, why do we have a finance cabinet that the governor oversees? Your guess is as good as mine. But putting that to the side, it goes to that finance cabinet, who then can override their problems with the contract, which is kind of fascinating to look at, and to think that the Beshear Administration puts these contracts in place, and then it's the Beshear Administration that then gets to veto the oversight committee's vote there. Now, there is a bill that's been working its way through the state Supreme Court for the last year or so that would move that veto power at least over to the treasurer, so that way, at least now, you'd get a lot more oversight, but then at least there's somebody else who's differently elected having some eyeballs on this contract, whose sole role is to look at, is this a good expenditure of funds? So not only were they unable, not only does this show an incompetence levels that you would never see in the private sector. This is a $6.2 million project, and they were given months to answer the question, why does it cost so darn much? And you heard, that was their answers. Nothing. They could not point to a single reason exactly why. Even when asked plainly, wouldn't it be cheaper to build an existing than it would be something that doesn't exist? Nothing. Crickets. But then the incompetence level of not really seeing a problem with this at all, not trying to maximize the most effect for the tax dollars being spent. And so while people may have no issue at all with spending money rebuilding homes in areas affected by disasters like eastern and western Kentucky, tornadoes and floods, people do take issue, you should all take issue with, is that even being smartly spent at the time? And this is key as we're looking at federal spending, state spending. It's not just what they're spending money on, but are they spending it in a way that maximizes the benefit, maximizes the dollars to achieve their stated goals? In this case, it's pretty clear that it doesn't. And this contract isn't a one-off. I mean, we've seen similar projects coming out of the Beshear Administration in Western Kentucky as well. Similar pricing, right around that $350,000 a unit. I mean, heck, it's good. It's good work if you can get it. You know, it's funny they talk about it being a nonprofit contractor, like that's somehow really great in saving money. But it'd be interesting to see how that nonprofit contractor is set up. Is all of his subcontractors? You know, are they nonprofits? Probably not. So they make money on the deal. Do they get to charge them extra? How much is the overseers of the project getting paid? Does the builder nonprofit, but then they hire a construction management company that they also own that gets to make a profit off of managing the project? These are all questions that lead to why does it cost so darn much per unit? $345,000 an apartment in Jackson, Kentucky. Now, there was another contract I wanted to look at coming out of the Housing Corporation. We'll be digging into that. Then also Beshear, he's up in arms. He's upset at TJ Roberts, Representative Roberts in the state legislature, and he's decided to lash out, being, pretty classic, why are you so obsessed with me type response, when a legislator is trying to hold a governor accountable. We'll have all that and more when we come back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. You can always head over to theandrewshow.com, hit the Listen Now tab, see where else to listen. We'll be back in a few short minutes. And welcome back to this final segment of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So before the break, I'd been discussing some of these contracts going through the contract review committee, and I had another contract that caught my eye that I wanted to talk about. And this one's from the Kentucky Housing Corporation, where they're paying one Darlene Matthews Incorporated, DBA Equity in Action out of Georgia. And what they're paying Equity in Action to do is they're paying them $194,100 to provide funds for strategic planning and general consulting services, specifically relating to the advancement of equity within the Kentucky balance of state continuums of care to prevent and end homelessness in accordance with Executive Orders 13985, 14091, and the Executive Order for Advancing Racial Equity and Support for Underserved Communities through the federal government. Now, if you remember at the national level, the president in question currently, Trump, he had done a few executive orders. You would think that executive order would include undoing these kinds of things, because this is a 100% federally funded contract that went through the contract review committee themselves. And, they didn't actually pull this contract out or delay it or anything. What's funny is if they had delayed it, I do think this contract wouldn't have gone through. It wouldn't have had the opportunity to go through because Trump's executive orders would have removed the funding. But if they are able to get this approved and funded, they said they're throwing gold bars off a sinking ship. That's how they described what they were doing in the final days of the Biden administration. If they did manage to get this funded and approved, this is now $194,100 of taxpayer funds being spent to forward the equity, racial equity and support for underserved communities in housing. Now, I was curious, what is it that Darlene Matthews at Equity in Action does that is worth $194,100? So I decided to go head over to the old interwebs and went to her website. Under services, this is what they have. So our services, training and education. They do training for executive, mid-level, and frontline staff, leadership training offerings, foundation of human-centered practice, building a culture of belonging, identity, and allyship. Trainings are designed around your organizational needs. Now, let me ask you, when it comes to the Kentucky Housing Administration, their mission, right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you agree with it or not, is to find housing for those who are in poverty, those who otherwise can't find housing. That's their job. That's their entire job. Now, you would think that would simply require that, you go ahead and only care about how much money a person's making to determine if you help them or not. I mean, that's literally it. If you're making enough and have the ability to purchase your own home, then shouldn't this program in its current mission and the way it's envisioned, like I said, you can disagree that the program shouldn't exist, but based on its stated goals, the only thing you should care about is what the income level of the person is. And you should maybe care about the region they're living in too, of course, because you want to adjust that income level for the region. For an example, $30,000 a year in Lexington might make it hard for you to find housing. But $30,000 a year in Jackson, Kentucky, which we were just talking about, would be a little bit easier for you to find housing. I mean, if you take that home I was talking about earlier in Jackson, Kentucky, that was on a little more than an acre, 3,000 square feet, newly done up home, you bring that to Kentucky, you're looking at $700,000-$800,000 house potentially, maybe a bit less, but the land really adds to it. You're probably talking maybe even doubled that price. So, obviously $30,000 in Jackson may not put you in a place where you would struggle to find housing, but it would in Lexington. So really all they should care about is how much you make and where you live. They shouldn't care about whether or not you have a foundation of human-centered practice or building a culture of belonging or identity and allyship. The other services they also offer policy work and data-driven action, quantitative and qualitative, analysis of primary and secondary sources to develop metric-driven statements and calls to action, dealing here specifically with equity. So, looking at what you're doing and deciding if it's quote-unquote equitable enough. And then finally here they have stakeholder engagement, authentic engagement with all stakeholders. We engage with important stakeholders ranging from executives, frontline staff, and the communities that they serve to identify gaps, strengths, needs, and interests to create a variety of curated products that include multi-year strategic plans, action plans, leadership, and human-centered strategies. They also facilitate authentic community engagement. These include focus groups. These include consolidated planning meetings. And many of their services can be provided both in person and virtually. Now, let me ask you this. So keep in mind, this contract here was almost $200,000. What do you think better serves? So let's say you agree with the mission that they're doing. You think government should do this. It shouldn't be left to private organizations. So even, really that's somebody who's very far left communist would agree. So I would ask that person, the very far left communist socialist person, what do you think better helps the people that you're quote unquote serving? To spend $200,000 learning about equity and allyship, or to spend $200,000 on getting people into homes that need them, that simply have an income level that matches to their geographic level that requires that need? You see, that's the real enemy here, is the left is defending a lot of this crazy spending we're calling out, saying, oh, no, it's useful, oh, it's great. They're ignoring the fact that these said departments, the homes building going on in Eastern Kentucky, this contract here, they have a mission that they're supposed to accomplish. And when they're diverting the money they do bring in to this kind of uselessness, to this kind of waste and fraud and abuse, well, you end up in a position where you're helping less people. So even those who are on the farthest left should be able to look at these kinds of things and say, this isn't helping anybody. Why are we wasting our money on it? Finally, we have a interesting moment here I want to mention dealing with Andy Beshear. Now, he was asked about TJ Roberts. TJ Roberts has been pretty outspoken. He's the one who originally pulled out the $81,000 that Beshear had spent traveling to Davos and Madrid on the taxpayer dime. And, TJ had called that out and said, look, that is, Representative Roberts had called that out and said, this is ridiculous spending. Pointed it out, Republican Party of Kentucky jumped on it from there, so on and so forth. And so Beshear was asked about that at a committee hearing. Let's hear what he has to say.
Listen, there's a new freshman Republican out there that seems pretty focused on me. He's filed a whole lot of bills that deal with me. He must think about me a lot. I don't think about him at all.
So that was Beshear. He thinks he's being cute there. So he said that he that TJ Roberts, that Representative Roberts must be obsessed with him because he's filed all these laws to rein in the governor. And that he's asking how Beshear's spending $80,000. Now, the Democrats think this is a big dunk, but it's really vapid, and it shows exactly the kind of teenager that Beshear is. You know, why are you so obsessed with me, basically? Because first off, when the legislature passes bills, it is to direct spending policy, behavior, and laws to deal with the executive branch, of which Beshear, as he regularly wants to argue in court, is the head of. So, yeah, of course, literally any law anybody files somehow, some way affects Beshear. So at this point, he's calling out TJ for filing bills, period, and then also for calling into question the need to spend $81,000 on Beshear's trip around Europe, and if that was helpful to the taxpayer. And instead of responding with how he helped the taxpayer or anything else, he responded with, I don't get why you're so obsessed with me. I don't think about him at all. Well, first, obviously you do, Beshear. You knew exactly what they were talking about. You knew exactly what the problem was right away, so don't try to feed us that line of garbage. But also, this isn't a dunk. This is somebody being a child when somebody's just simply trying to fulfill their job of holding the executive branch both accountable and directing policy within the executive branch. And yet there are the Democrats. That sounds great. The Kentucky Democrat Party even posted a video where they said that Beshear was doing a thug life moment. I don't think about him at all. Thug life. Ain't thug life. That's irresponsible elected representative. That's a trash governor. Well, y'all, that's what we got time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. That's all. Till next time, we'll be seeing you.